Perfect.
Oh, welcome everybody. For those of you joining, please continue to join and connect. And for everyone else, welcome. Welcome to the National Water Service Providers Meeting hosted by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the Administration of Children and Families, the Office of Community Services, for the Low Income Housing Water Assistance Program. My name is Stacy Flowers. And I'm with ICF, that's a consultant for OCS. And we will be doing some housekeeping before I turn it back over to Christina. During the program, everybody should be on mute. And we will have Christina Clark and Mary Watts do a presentation. During this presentation, you have the chat function available, and please ask any questions. And once the presentation is complete, they will answer the questions from the presentation as they can. We'll also then move it to a panel discussion. And after the panel discussion, we'll have a live Q&A, and that's when we will go over, you'll be able to raise your hand, and we'll take it in order of the hands that are being raised. And we'll review the questions, and then we'll also return back to any of the questions that have been asked in chat. And we will answer as many as possible. And for those that we aren't able to answer due to time, we will follow up with information for everyone that has registered here, and also with our grantees with additional information. So we welcome you guys. And let me turn this back over to Christina Clark. But also, before I do, because I was told by many to say this, if you want to optimize so you don't hit, we have quite a lot of people on this meeting. There's an ellipsis, there's 3 dots up at the top on the right-hand corner. And if you click on it, then you can choose to optimize, and you won't have all of the speakers' faces or names, and you'll just be able to see the presentation and the person speaking at the time. So let's move forward. Christina Clark will be speaking, and she's the Operations Branch Chief for the Low Income Water Assistance Program. She has over 15 years of experience working on programs targeted to alleviate causes and conditions for poverty for individuals and families, including over 10 years of experience working with Native American tribes and tribal nonprofits through the Administration of Native Americans with the Administration of Children and Families. Christina is a returned Peace Corps volunteer, having just served over 2 years in Costa Rica working on rural community development projects. Christina, welcome.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stacy. And I want to thank all of you for joining us here today to talk about this exciting program. Before I start, Stacy, I just asked, there's still some folks joining the waiting room, so if you could just keep an eye on that and make sure that you admit them as they come in, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Right. And so once again, thank you for joining us today. It has been some time since the Office of Community Services has come together with water service providers on a national level. And so I'm so happy to have this opportunity to engage with all of you here today. I began working on LIHWAP in February of 2021, just after the initial appropriation. And so at the time, I knew there was a great need for this program. And while I did not know very much about the water landscape across the country, I did know that people were experiencing significant hardships due to the COVID pandemic. I knew that families and individuals were struggling on multiple levels, including with physical and mental health, as well as financially. And I knew that this program, targeted to make sure that they could afford to keep in-home water services turned on, was important to keeping them healthy and safe. I also had an idea about the moratoria that had been put in place to prevent utility shutoffs, and that they were set to expire soon. So there was this urgent need to enhance the social safety net to offer protections from Americans who were facing new and changing needs. In addition to individuals and families struggling, we saw businesses struggling as well, as the loss of employment decreased revenues across the board and either forced closures or put businesses in the red or at risk for closure. And so the need was there, and I knew it. What I did not know is that there's a vast water landscape across this country, one that includes over 50,000 water and wastewater service providers that operate on scales that vary from having customers across several states to serving small communities with 20 connections. I became aware of the need for partnership with water service providers as a requirement to make LIHWAP work. It is with the hard work and dedication of LIHWAP grant recipients, along with contributions from water service providers and partner organizations, that we've been able to launch this first ever federally funded water assistance program. And we have made great progress, but we're striving to increase our reach. And so for those of you who are just learning about LIHWAP, I hope we're able to encourage you to follow up and engage with those that are implementing LIHWAP in your service area. For those of you that have questions, I hope we're able to answer some of those questions here for you today. And for those of you that are participating, I thank you for becoming a part of the safety net for the customers that you serve. And so with that, I welcome all of you to today's meeting. And once again, I thank you so much for joining us. So we could go to the next slide. So just a quick outline of what we'll be talking about today. I'm doing the introduction and the status update for you. After that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Mary Watson. She's going to demonstrate the LIHWAP Data Dashboard, and that's where we're providing quarterly updates and have some interactive tools to show the progress of the program. So we're really excited about that. After that, we'll turn it over to a panel discussion, and there'll be some question and answers with grant recipients and the water service providers in their area. Then there'll be time for that live question and answer as Stacey was describing. And then after that, we will close. So next slide, please.
Christina, sorry to interrupt. We have a few people saying that it's a little hard to hear. If you could just speak a little bit louder. I'm able to hear on my end. So I also encourage everyone to increase their volume on their speakers if possible.
Thank you, Mary. And I'll try to speak up a little bit. So just a brief recap of the program and the structure of LIHWAP. LIHWAP is an emergency water and wastewater assistance program. It was authorized in response to the COVID pandemic with a combined total of just over $1.1 billion for implementation. Currently, there's no permanent authorization for LIHWAP, but as we know, utility costs are steadily increasing, and so this program addresses a permanent need. LIHWAP's purpose is to provide utility payment assistance to reduce rates and arrearages for low-income households. And so really we're talking about keeping the water on. And to do that, LIHWAP allows for the full payment of past due water bills to ensure connection to in-home services. Payment for current bills is also allowable to ensure affordability. In addition to offering support for households, LIHWAP also supports water utilities by helping them recoup revenue that was lost due to lost wages and economic strain that resulted from the COVID pandemic. LIHWAP's funding structure requires that benefit payments are made directly to the water utility provider on behalf of eligible households. And this requirement was identified in the authorizing legislation. It's critical to the way that planning and implementation contributed to LIHWAP. And I'll talk a little bit about this more on the next slide. So we could go to the next slide, please. Thanks. Some key program elements. So as I mentioned, LIHWAP's intent is to maintain water services for low-income households. And to emphasize the importance of continuity of water services, OCS established 3 priorities. So the first priority is restoring services for households that have been disconnected and do not have water services in their home. The second priority is preventing disconnections for households that are at risk because of past due balances on their account. And so for the first and second priority, LIHWAP benefits can cover the full amount needed to reconnect or prevent disconnection. So that's likely the full amount of the past due balance as well as any late fees or reconnection fees. The third priority includes households that are current on their bill but are seeking assistance to reduce the total to help ensure affordable services. And so another element that's critical to LIHWAP are the vendor agreements between the grant recipient and the water service provider. And I want to spend just a little bit more time than usual talking about these agreements in order to lean into the expertise as well as some of the questions that were presented in registration. So LIHWAP benefit payments are administered by the state, territory, or tribe who's the grant recipient. And as mentioned, the grant recipient must make the payment directly to the water utility provider on behalf of the household. And so vendor agreements define the terms and conditions for the work and the communication between the grant recipient and the water service provider who is ultimately receiving that benefit payment. Establishing the terms and conditions for receiving and applying payments on behalf of households is required before the water utility can receive that LIHWAP benefit payment. So a little bit about what's included in those agreements. From the federal program perspective, the requirement is that the grant recipient and the water utility agree upon the procedures and methods for confirming on a regular basis that the services have been restored or maintained after receiving that benefit payment, and that the payments have been applied to the eligible household's account in the amount of the payment that was received. And lastly, the water utility must ensure that they will not charge fees for receiving or processing a LIHWAP benefit payment. So no additional costs associated with participating in the program. In addition to that, I would add that as a mandatory grant program, LIHWAP recipients have the discretion to tailor many of the policies and procedures related to implementation. Therefore, the states, territories, and tribes may identify the need to include additional requirements that are specific to the codes, policies, or bylaws of their area. For example, I spoke with a LIHWAP grant recipient that included policies related to state requirements for monitoring and auditing associations or organizations that receive benefit payments. And so they had those requirements for monitoring for the state, and they included that in their service agreement. Also, this particular grantee mentioned that they included requirements related to confidentiality based on their state protocols. And so therefore, those agreements, those terms and conditions support compliance with state requirements as well. OCS does encourage grant recipients to be flexible and to consider the terms and conditions as well as methods to simplify those requirements wherever possible. However, the LIHWAP grant recipients do need to ensure that they are protecting the integrity of their own established policies and procedures. And so this might look slightly different on a state-by-state basis. So looking ahead, although there's been great success related to establishing agreements, we still have a long way to go in regards to partnering with water service providers. As I mentioned, we know there's over 50,000 water service providers across the country, and LIHWAP really needs participation from as many of those as possible to ensure equitable access to benefits on behalf of the households. And I would add to that that one of the outcomes of LIHWAP is the connections built between the state and social service agencies. And it's easy to agree that this access to water is critical to ensuring health and safety for households. And therefore, building these relationships between social service agencies and water service providers increases the capacity to protect the health and safety of households. And so next slide, please. When talking about the current status, I have to once again acknowledge the tremendous amount of work that's gone into standing up this program. And so on March 11th, we celebrated the 1-year anniversary of the American Rescue Plan. And when I reflect on how far we've come since then, I know it's because the hard work and dedication of the individuals who have dedicated countless hours to supporting families. So currently there's over $1 billion in LIHWAP funding that's been released. We have 49 states, 5 territories, the District of Columbia, and just under 100 tribes that are implementing LIHWAP with those funds. The initial awards were made late in May, and since then, brand new programs have been developed from the ground up. We've learned that the first applications for assistance were accepted in October, so that's just less than 6 months after the grant awards were made. And based on the initial assessment of the second quarterly reports, we've seen that during the second quarter, there's been a ramp up in the progress. And so although this data is preliminary, what we have learned and we're sharing is that we now know LIHWAP has served over 150,000 households, and that includes 95,000 households that would have otherwise had their services disconnected. So we've prevented disconnection or restored disconnection for 95,000 households. In addition to that, we've learned that grantees have entered into agreements with over 8,000 water service providers. Because these agreements with water service providers must be put in place, we know that those are 8,000 service areas that are served, but we also know that there's a lot more work left to go in order to partner with the water service providers. Okay. And so that's why these discussions like this are so important today. I would note that we've encouraged states to roll out their programs in phases and to reserve funding for areas where they're still working to enter into those service agreements. And so there's still funding available and room for new service providers to join. And then just the last thing I would mention in regards to the current status is our focus on outreach to build awareness for households and visibility for the program. And so we've launched radio ads. We've got some videos that are included in the dashboard you'll see later that highlight the impact on the level of the beneficiary, just so that they're really aware that this program exists. Next slide, please. And then the last thing I'll mention before I pass it over to Mary is just some of the opportunities to enhance the program. And so we continue to look for these opportunities, encourage you to participate as well. And so the first one is lifting up best practices. If something is working well, we want to share that. And so that includes providing opportunities to connect with grantees and water service providers and hear what's going on in the field. As a new program, we have learned that stakeholders and households may not be familiar. And so that outreach that I mentioned is so critical. And then I'm also building networks to increase the capacity to support administration for this utility benefits program. And so we're encouraging connections between water associations, municipal groups, and water service providers to lay the foundation, because we know that the need for water utility support will only increase or continue. And then the last thing that's important to us is making sure we're able to tell the story of LIHWAP. And so this includes gathering data and testimonials that demonstrate how important this program is, not only to emphasize where we're being successful, but also to demonstrate where we may be falling short in addressing needs and to be able to highlight that and understand as well. Okay. And so with that, I will turn it over to Mary Watts, who's going to walk you through the data dashboard.
Thank you so much, Christina. Welcome. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I am the Policy Branch Chief for the LIHWAP program. And so I have the honor of being able to share actually OCS's first live public dashboard, which is a display of our data. We had quarterly reports as well as annual report requirement for this program. Because it is a new program, we wanted to try to get information on how it was being implemented as quickly as possible. So that's why we have the extra requirement of a quarterly report process. So we do not have time for me to go through every single bit of the dashboard, which is quite a lot of data. So I'm going to be dropping the link into the chat. Feel free to peruse at your own time as well. But I want to share my screen and go over some of the most important elements of the dashboard, which I think will help water service providers better understand the program and know where we have where we are to date. And again, this is reflective of Q1 and their implementation information. And Q1 was through December 31st of 2021. We will release the updated numbers for Q2, which will go through the end of March, the first week of June. All right, so hopefully you can see my screen. This is the homepage, has a little bit about the program, as well as a link back to our main LIHWAP website and our contact information below. So up here, you'll see a navigation bar. The first one is implementation information. So when you click on this, there's quite a few different aspects to click through. I'm not going to go through our milestones page, although that would be helpful for your review. It's a history of where the program came from and where we are to date. I'm going to first focus on the national snapshot. And this is broken down into different areas, and this reflects the state grant recipients' implementation information. The tribe and territory data will be added when we launch our Q2 reports the first week of June. So this will give just an understanding of how each state decided to plan their program. So as Christina mentioned, states have a little bit of wiggle room on certain elements of their program. For example, what their maximum benefit amount might be towards a household or which priority groups they're serving. So this is just an overview. You can click on each state to find out what funding they were given. And you can find out a breakdown of how they decided to have the funding in between two different, in between the budget line items in a different area, which I will show you, which I saw a question asked about that. Then there's operational priorities. Basically, are they using the funding to restore services, prevent disconnection, or reduce rates, or if they have a different other operational priority. Each one of these is shown through a map feature as well as a dashboard that is percentage feature, and then we have accessible reader-friendly versions of this data for each indicator. Then we have categorical eligibility, which means if they are using other programs to determine income eligibility. So if they are already enrolled in the low-income home energy assistance program, means tested veterans programs, SSI, SNAP, or TANF, if a household member is already enrolled in that program, some states are choosing to automatically enroll them in LIHWAP then. Then we have income eligibility. So the federal requirement was that they had to either make under 150% of the federal poverty guidelines or 60% of their state median income. And a recipient could have chose to do a hybrid approach using both of those depending on the amount of household. So this will show you which one for each state. Then we have target groups, and this is if they are giving priority to certain populations, whether it's people with disabilities, families that have children 0 to 5, seniors, individuals that have a high water burden, so pay a large amount of their income towards water, or if they set a different priority. And again, there's different ways to look at this data for each indicator. And then we have their minimum and maximum benefits, what they estimated allowing for each payment on behalf of the household. So you can look at each individual state and pick one and see which one is applicable to the area that you provide water service in. And then we also have the different, I apologize, my internet is being a little slow. So then we also have their, the amount of water utility vendors that are in their area. So this is based off of data that we collected. So you can see that Texas has the most versus the District of Columbia at the bottom. So then we also have this in a way where you can actually look at their implementation information state by state. So we can go to a different state and you can see the different information. So for example, California, which is where I am located, I can see how they planned out their program. And that's on the implementation plans. Then you can look at trends. You can look at state by state. And this might be helpful if you're a water service provider that actually serves multiple states. So you could pick Alabama and Arkansas and see two opposite each other. And then we also have a section for what our current challenges and support that we're looking for the program listed here, which I won't go over at this time. Then we have our quarterly report information. And again, this is actually reflective of Q1, so through December 31st, 2021. So at that point, we had 24 states that had implemented their program. And based off of numbers in that quarterly report, 42 states would have started their program by April 1st. So it will give an overview of which states started in this graph. So you can see the dark blue are the states that had began during that quarter and the numbers associated households they served in that quarter. You can get a breakdown of more of that information down below based on what type of services they provided and what type of households, as well as how many water agreements were in place with service providers like yourself. At that point, we had almost 5,000. And then we have the option where you can drill down into each state or tribe and territory once that is done. So you can see, for example, Iowa, which you'll hear from today on the panel. You can see their information and where they served. The gray zeros indicate that they actually had not planned on serving that area in their implementation plan. So because of that, what they decided to set up their program versus what they actually did, we added another tool called quarterly trends, where you're able actually to see how they planned their program and where they are to date. So for example, we can go to Iowa again, and you will see how they planned their program on the left side versus where they are as of that quarter. So I'm not going to go through any more of that. However, we do have a national spotlight page where we have highlighted some different videos, which we will keep updating as regular as possible, as well as a glossary page that has some common terms and definitions based on our OCS definitions for anything related to this website. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I know that was a lot of information to go through. So I just encourage you to go through the dashboard on your own and use it as an opportunity to understand what your state, how they've planned their program and where they are to date. And also I did put in the chat the list of recipients, and And in you can go through that list and get your contact person for your particular state if you haven't been able to get in contact with them to date. And now I will pass it back to one of our program specialists, Mitch Navetta. He is going to introduce our panelists.
Thanks so much, Mary, and welcome, good afternoon, everyone, to this meeting. I'd just like to give a little bit of introduction to the panelists, and then we'll open it up to them to have a sort of conversation-style discussion. So today we are joined by representatives from the Iowa LIHWAP program and their local water service provider, the Missouri State LIHWAP program and their local water service providers. We also have representatives from American Water Works, which represents multiple states, and their participants in the LIHWAP program. I will just ask panelists when you begin a question, if you could just, your response to a question, if you could just introduce yourself and your organization. So I'm going to start just asking if the state grant recipients could give us an overview of their program, their priorities, the current number of households served, and then kick it over to the water service provider to talk about how their organization participates in the program. So I would like to start with, well, anyone who'd like to go first, between Iowa or Missouri. Feel free to unmute yourself and dive in.
Hi, Mitch. We'll go first. This is Iowa. Hi, everybody. My name is Bill Marquis, and I'm the program planner for LIHEAP and LIHWAP here in Iowa. As far as program implementation, we decided that we were going to operate as a crisis component, and so we were focusing on the first two priorities. We are considering maybe looking more at the rate reduction piece in FY23, but so far we've been looking at just averting disconnection and emergency reconnection. Prior to implementation, we reached out to various agencies such as the Iowa DNR and associations like the Iowa Association of Water Agencies to start building some relationships with them and start educating them about the program, and in the same regard, educate ourselves about what they do. We found those relationships to be incredibly helpful. They were instrumental in helping to promote the program and spread the word among their members, and it's been incredibly helpful to have their support. Since we have been operating since October, as of March 31st, we are at 640 water providers who have signed on, and we have served 8,693 households with LIHWAP. With me today is Paula Arkema, who is a LIHEAP coordinator for our local agency here in the Des Moines area, and Laura Sarcone, who is representing Des Moines Waterworks. Paula?
Hi, everyone. It's good to see everyone. I don't have anything to add. I think Bill did a great job providing that snapshot for Iowa, but I just take a minute to introduce myself. I am Paula Arkema, and I'm the Health and Energy Coordinator with Impact Community Action Partnership in Central Iowa.
Hello, everyone. I'm Laura Sarcone. I'm the Director of Customer Service and Marketing at Des Moines Waterworks. We are an independent, board-governed regional drinking water utility providing retail water services to Des Moines and surrounding communities, as well as 12 wholesale communities and districts. We serve water to 4 counties for a total of 600,000 Central Iowans receiving our water. Des Moines Waterworks has approximately 80,000 direct residential customer accounts. We have combined billing for drinking water, plus we are the billing agent for city services and sanitary, sewer, stormwater, garbage, and recycling. And I'll turn it over to the next state for their introductions.
Thanks, Laura. I'll turn it over to Missouri now for their introductions.
Alrighty. Hi, guys. My name is Taylor Dunn. I'm with the state of Missouri. I am a program specialist over the LIHWAP program. And then I've got Stacy with me. I'll pass it on to her as well.
Hi, I'm Stacy Kaler. I'm also a program specialist for the LIHEAP and LIHWAP programs in the state of Missouri. And our providers with us today are Missouri American Water and City Utilities of Springfield.
Thank you, Stacy and Taylor, and also Mara from American Water. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and speak a little bit about your experience with the program, if you'd like.
So my name is Mara Beckmeyer, and I am the manager in the Billing and Collections Department. One of the teams that I'm responsible for does all of the pledges or promise to pays, however you refer to them. We've been an active participant from a vendor perspective since the beginning of the LIHWAP program. American Water, we have multiple states, and we have 14 different states that we serve, water and wastewater. We have signed 10 agreements, and we have 3 that are pending. So we are very active in the promotion and processing of the LIHWAP funds, and have very successfully managed to keep customers connected and reconnect if necessary.
Thanks, everyone. I just want to make sure I didn't miss anyone in our introductory phase. And if not, I can move on to our first question after the overviews. So for the states, you gave an overview of your program. I'm just curious about, did you have to make any changes for the water service providers? Did you have to make any changes to your policies or systems in order to participate? And if everyone could talk about what sort of challenges they faced in launching their program and how they addressed them. I'm not sure who would like to go first. Someone can just start us off.
Sure, I'll go first. So, we started the program with the same processes that we already had in place for payment assistance and assisting customers. However, we did have to take a step back, realizing that the volume drastically increased. At one point in time, I believe we were doing, maybe 148 pledges a week, and currently we're at over 1,000 a week. So with the volume and the increase, it was necessary to take a step back and, figure out the best way that we can, that we can ensure that these customers are being reconnected or prevent disconnection. So we did have to make some changes to our process. I think one of the main things that we did was, we had a community email address, meaning, all of the customers that we served, whether they were for a municipal request or a customer that needed information, one of our larger water usage customers, were all filtered into the same email address. So we isolated an email address for just our payment assistance requests. That way I could staff that accordingly to the volume. I did have to, borrow resources from other areas in order to maintain, a somewhat 24 to 48 hour timeline, unless the customer has been disconnected. Obviously, we want to address those first. But yeah, we did have to change some of our processes in order to make sure that we were keeping up with the volume.
From Des Moines' perspective, similarly to American Water, we also had systems and processes in place already to receive assistance programs. So very similarly, we also had to adjust some of our staffing needs to certainly handle the great amount of requests that were coming in to our water utility for the customer assistance through LIHWAP. I want to first also start out by saying when the program was announced, Des Moines Waterworks was very cautious about signing on the agreement. However, with the state of Iowa and our Community Action Agency impact, they really encouraged us to look at the vendor agreement and really dissect it and send our questions and concerns to them directly, and they would help us interpret the language of the agreement in order to figure out if it would be a solution for us to provide to our customers. Also, as Bill mentioned, one of our statewide drinking water associations hosted a meeting and crowdsourced a lot of questions and concerns. So the whole state of Iowa was receiving the same information and same answers to the questions and concerns that drinking water utilities had. So we were able to sign that vendor agreement after our questions and concerns were addressed in October of 2021. And before then, we were really working with Impact in the state to address the questions we had about our payment allocation rules in our billing system. We are a combined billing utility, not just for drinking water and other water services, but also garbage and recycling, association dues, service charges, and service line protection programs. So we have a lot on our bills, not water service related. So we were able to get some guidance and interpretation from the state and Impact to really help us proceed in signing the agreement and offering the program to our customers. So we are so happy we did, and you'll hear some about our successes here in Central Iowa from Paula in a moment.
And I would just, for the state of Missouri, I would like to give kind of some background information about LIHWAP and how we kind of got it up and running. So we actually started accepting applications on February 28th in the state of Missouri. Our payments first went out in mid-April. We kind of set up the program as a one-time payment per program year, which we consider as October through September, up to our $750 max benefit amount per household. Applicants receive the payments based on the bills that they submit on the application. So whatever they're needing assistance with, if it's a past due bill or a current bill, whatever they submit with that application is how we kind of determine up to that $750 max benefit amount, what they will be receiving and what the suppliers need to apply on their accounts. In Missouri, we currently have served over 5,000 households across the state. We have about 33% of our water service providers on board. We have received 376 agreements out of our potential 1,135. So we are going to continue with outreach tactics to all of our potential suppliers around the state of Missouri as well. We do work with 19 of our contracted agencies who process our LIHWAP applications. And then our suppliers who participate are actually able to log in to our MIS payment portal in order to respond to the outstanding pledges that they have. And then I'm not sure if we have city utilities on with us yet, but I wanted to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves as well.
Hey everyone, this is Dustin Price. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of some issues with the computer, but we should have Rebecca and Mary on with us, and they are kind of the masterminds behind getting this rolling for us. Right now, if I'm not mistaken, I believe we've assisted 48 customers or households, and our first payment came in at the end of April. So we're just now getting things rolling. No major changes for us, but sure thankful that we have the program.
Thank you, Dustin, and thank you, Mara, as well with Missouri American Water for sharing.
Yes, Taylor, we've worked together.
Thanks everyone for responding to that question. Next, I was just hoping to talk about, so those are some of the challenges you faced and how you address those, but let's also talk about what's working well and maybe what advice you might share for other states or water service providers. If someone would like to start us off.
I'll start again, I don't mind. I can say that, you know, one of the things that we found to be key is when we first were made aware of the program, our government affairs vice president gathered a contact person from each state so that there was, you know, awareness. Sometimes when you're working with a utility the size of ours, to make sure that the information is disseminated to all the different areas that need it, can be quite challenging. So we did have a contact person from each state. And then of course myself, which being the person at the customer service organization for the service company. And we had regular meetings. We reviewed all the contracts together, made recommendations. We had someone from legal on there. And I think the biggest thing was to have those contacts. We've worked together. And now that we have the program running, we've been reaching out and gathering contacts within the agencies that are processing and working with us for the pledges. I know Iowa DHR, we've worked together from the Iowa American Water side, Taylor on the Missouri American side. So having those connections and that open communication, changes are going to happen. And I know that when Taylor and her team were working to get a portal up and running, I agreed that I would help test that, because again, the information that I have and can share with my team is going to make sure that this program is successful for Missouri American Water customers, and the same with Iowa American. We have worked closely with them before LIHWAP, so when we had to make some changes to our process, having people to contact and to work through that. I think once you explain the why and you say, we weren't expecting the volume, we're happy to have it because, realistically, we're helping a lot of customers, and it's a win-win for the company as well. By the fact that we're continuing to be able to provide service and help reduce customers, past due balances. So I think that's, that contact and that communication. I know I get several emails that say, can someone please call me? We haven't got a check that's cleared, something that's happened. And those are the kinds of things where you need to be able to have that dedicated resource that can contact. Let's work through this together. What do we need to do, first of all, to make sure that the customer isn't impacted by a behind the scenes payment type issue? And then once we've got that resolved, let's figure out how to move forward to make sure we get the payments and they are posted correctly and all of the other terms of the vendor agreement.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of echo, I appreciate you saying all of that, because the Iowa American Water was phenomenal to work with. And, they went out of their way to say, what can we do to help? And I think all the vendors that we worked with, all the providers out there understand the benefit to their customers. They understand the benefit to the community. What we found was that sometimes there was a lack of understanding about how the grant actually worked, how it could be interpreted. And that was really what we saw as our responsibility then, to communicate that, to build those relationships up, to find what is it that is of a concern that may be causing hesitancy to participate, and then how can we compromise, where can we meet you in the middle to try to ease those concerns. I think one of the issues, and Laura touched on this as well, that really had providers a little concerned in the beginning had to do with those bundled bills. I don't think realized, at least here in Iowa, just how prevalent that is, that water providers are billing for more than just water. And so, that particular limitation in the grant was a sticking point for a lot of our water providers. What we did is we approached it as trying to look at it, reframe it as, the payment that we can provide, look at it like a payment on a payment arrangement. And if you do that, then from there, you have some time for the customer to work with you to set up how to get on an actual payment arrangement for those remaining amounts. And then the other concern we saw really had to do with the software, the billing software, the business model, what policies would we have to change? There was a lot of understandable concern about that as well. And, I think when we were able to kind of explain that what we do is we pay for the amounts that are due for drinking water and wastewater. And then once you receive that payment, if your billing software has to apply it a certain way, then that's okay. That's okay. We're just not paying above and beyond what's due for the water portion. So between those two things, I think it eased a lot of concern, and we saw a lot of water providers agree to sign on after we kind of explained that interpretation of the grant language.
I think I would just add to what Bill just shared. As we were developing these relationships with the water service providers, One other pretty constant theme that we heard in Iowa, when they sign a vendor agreement, they are agreeing to either reestablish service or maintain service for 30 days. But we've had some challenges with with agencies being able to make those payments within the 30 days. Sometimes there is a delay in the funds getting to the community action agency and then us being able to pass them on to the water service vendors. But again, it's that relationship and that trust building and that communication. And so we've been able to have opportunity to sit down with the water service vendors and just figure it out. Specific to our relationship with Des Moines Waterworks, they met us in the middle, and they were willing to extend that 30 days for their customers to 40 and 45 days sometimes, to give us a little bit of a grace period. And then we've even been able to work out opportunities where we can send kind of a pre-report, if you will, to the water service providers that lets them know these are the customers that we've not only pledged, but these are the payments you're going to be receiving in an anticipated payment date. And so it's just really keeping the communication open and just knowing there is a way. There's always a way to make it work.
And I just want to tack on a couple things that Paula and Bill have already mentioned. First and foremost, the established relationship between us as a water utility and our community action agency, which is Impact, really laid the groundwork for the success of LIHWAP on day one. We already had an established communication channel. We were ready to hit the ground running, and we were so successful, not without some challenges. And we were having emails and meetings weekly, bi-weekly, to fine-tune the processes on both ends of both the action agency and us as the utility, and what information was needed by whom. But that open line of communications and the relationship is certainly what set our program up for success. One of the challenges, I don't know if someone has already touched on this, but it still remains today, even after the program has launched, and we're still working on how to communicate it properly to our customers. But there will still end up likely being an unpaid balance for non-water services for customers receiving the LIHWAP funding. So it's important for Impact, our community action agency, and us as the drinking water utility, when communicating with the customer, to set those customer expectations that you still do have to make timely payments after your 30-day period of uninterrupted service, or your service has been restored for 30 days. There will be a balance for those non-water services that was unable to be funded by the LIHWAP program. So customers can either pay that in a lump sum, or we have had established pay agreements for a long time with our customers. So we are able to spread that payment remaining balance of the non-water services on top of the current charges that they owe, an extra 3 months or 6 months, to make that more manageable for the customer. Also, what has been very successful is something that American Water also mentioned, was a dedicated clearinghouse or email box for all of our assistance requests, and that is staffed. We try to get a timely response between 24 or 48 business hours, or 1 to 2 business days. And that really speeds up the communication between the two of us, Des Moines Waterworks and Impact. And also, what has been super beneficial and has created a lot of efficiencies is a standardized template that we are able to break out each water service, and then send that breakout to Impact. And so they are receiving a consistent layout of charges for every customer they are meeting with every day. So they're not fumbling between a customer service rep that does it this way and another rep that does it another way. It's a standard template that really increases the efficiency of passing the information between the two of us, and ultimately restores water quicker or keeps the water turned on for our customers.
Thanks, Laura. I just wanted to check in with the team in Missouri, either Dustin, Taylor, Stacy, anyone, if you have any thoughts on what's working well or what advice you might share.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Oh.
Stacy. Go
That's
ahead.
okay.
After you.
Yeah, well, I know I can talk a little bit about some of our challenges and how we overcame them with like what and what's working well now. We had a major shift when we started the program with our systems. We had one system in mind from the get-go, and things got delayed to a point where we were worrying about like how long will this actually take to get these benefits into customers' hands. So we ended up going with our vendor that does our crisis program for LIHWAP. They were able to work with us very quickly. They were able to get it up and running in about a month. They set up the web application in a way that's very beneficial for our customers and our community action agency staff, to where they don't have to do a lot of extra work entering that data. It comes right into the system for them. But it was a lot of challenges early on, especially with the number of water service providers that we had. And we had to give them access to the system so they can go in and they can accept those payments and pledges, and we can get those payments out to them as quickly as possible. But our vendor has been working with us very well. We've had a couple of meetings with them. We constantly try to get feedback from not only our agencies, but also our suppliers. And then we share that information with the vendor so we can improve the system. And one of the things that we're working with now, and we're going to be working with city utilities, the vendor has been working on it, is an SFTP process. So a file sharing process to where our water service providers that have a large volume of customers, we want them to do that file sharing so that they don't have to do as much hands-on work. It's one thing for our rural providers to, accept a handful of customers and then get that payment. But when you're talking about hundreds of customers, hundreds of payments in at a time, it can be very cumbersome, I know, for the suppliers. So we're trying to get that in place to where it'll improve the process for everyone. It'll help the agencies, it will help our water service providers, and it will help our customers get those benefits quicker. I don't know if Taylor, you had anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, just in terms of, successes that we've had with the program, which I know Iowa kind of mentioned as well, the relationship piece with the water service providers and agencies. But the main thing that we really saw success with was contacting our largest water service providers around the state before we got the program up and running fully. We really wanted to make sure we had contact with them and that we could answer any of their questions or concerns, notify them of the program and let them know of, hey, we've got this great thing, hopefully we'll be able to help all kinds of households around the state with your guys' help and participation. So it was really cool to be able to get on, phone calls with Missouri American Water, city utilities in Springfield, KC Water. Those are our top 3 largest water service providers around Missouri. But it was very cool to get on calls with them, and they were just very willing to listen, very willing to work with us. We got to basically get their input, things that we could improve, things we were doing good on already. So it was just nice to hear their opinions. We kind of worked together to figure out how we're going to get some vulnerable households helped with this program. So that was a very, very important piece for us. Relationships with our water service providers is very important. And we basically we like to have internal discussions to make sure that we can get this program, the best that it can be for the state of Missouri. So.
Yeah, this is Dustin with City Utilities again. I would echo really what everyone else said, but I would like to kind of touch on that piece that Stacy mentioned regarding the platform that we were planning to use and having to pivot and get this thing on the ground and moving. That was probably the toughest thing for us, and just not really knowing and being familiar with the program as it's new. But one thing I would just encourage everyone to do is trust everyone involved, and realize that you're working together to help people in your community, whether that's your neighbor or someone down the street. That's the end goal, right? Is to make sure that we're helping others that are in need. And it might be tough in the beginning, but as long as you are staying in constant communication and you guys can be transparent with one another as to what you need and what's going to make things helpful, you'll find that sweet spot. And for us, is the new portal exactly what we want? No, but like Taylor and Stacy said, we're working towards that file sharing, and that'll make it much more feasible for us. We're around 85,000 water customers. We also bill electric, which are around 130,000 customers. Natural gas, it's probably in that 80,000 range. And then we bill for the city sewer, and we have a transit and fiber optics. So there's a lot of things happening, a lot of moving parts. But I cannot commend Taylor and Stacy and team enough about how they've been so willing to listen to our needs and help us get this program going. So thank you guys.
Thanks, Dustin.
Thanks for that response. And I just will pose one last question to the panel, and then we can move into the Q&A section from the audience with their participation. So everyone, what one thing would you suggest to others who are working in your role?
I can start with that. The best piece of advice I can give is to really take a dual client mentality. The program is designed to help households. That's why we're here. It's what we do. But we also have to serve the water providers. They should be as much in our mind as a customer as the household. And I think the more that we can demonstrate that we understand or we want to learn your business model, your billing practices, where are your pain points, the more credibility I think that we build when we approach providers and say, hey, we would like you to take part in this program. I think they see very easily the benefit that it would have to the customers. And I think it helps to really point out too, that it's mutually beneficial. You're going to be collecting on amounts that very well otherwise could go unpaid. And for Des Moines Waterworks, for example, I know we've been able to recoup quite a bit for them. And I think that's really kind of showing to providers that we understand you have a business, we understand what your business needs are, we understand where perhaps the regulations can make it difficult to satisfy those needs, but where can we meet in the middle? Where can we compromise? And I think kind of tacked on to the end of that, we all want this to become a permanent program. Right now, it's only authorized through September of 23. But if it's going to become a permanent program, it's going to take participation. It's going to take showing that this money is spent in this time period because the need is there. And so I think the more that we kind of seek collaboration between state agencies, local agencies, water providers, and demonstrate to Congress that yes, this money is going to the purpose it was assigned to, it is needed, and it's not nearly enough. We need a lot more. I think that's how we're going to get there. So kind of taking that dual client mentality would be my best suggestion.
And that's a really great point, Bill. It really is. Yes, there has been a huge benefit. Most of our states, I think, have lessened their over 90-day and less accounts receivable balance. We've been able to clear balances for customers who were unable to get service at another address because of a past due bill somewhere. So they were kind of stranded. They didn't have water and they were moving somewhere else and they weren't able to get water because they had this bill out there. We've also taken measures to try to be proactive. If a customer calls into our call center and gets a customer care agent, we're proactively, if they're telling us, hey, we're working with someone, we're trying to get some payment assistance, then, you know, we automatically pull them from our collections bucket and put them in a holding pattern for 30 days so that they have that opportunity. Because for us, it's more cost effective to withhold collections for 30 days than for us to send a field representative there to shut off the water and then to go back and turn the water back on. There's a cost associated with those field visits as well. So we really had to take a look at the big picture. A couple of other things that we've done in order to promote the program is every one of our state websites has information on payment assistance. It has the links to all of the information for the LIHWAP program, who to contact, where to start your application. We've also done a lot of training with our customer care agents. If a customer calls in and they say, I'm having trouble, I'm experiencing some issues, we're referring them to this website and the information, because that's a dual benefit, right? Not only are we helping the customer, we're also clearing, you know, past due balances.
Now we know.
Off of our, you know, off of our books. So it's a really, you know, the program is, like Bill said, and I know Laura has mentioned this as well, it's a very necessary program. I don't know how many of you have ever experienced being without water due to a main break or something else, but I can tell you a personal story. My son lives in Austin, Texas, and as you know, Texas has their own utility, you know, electric power grid, and a couple of years ago they experienced a power outage in the middle of a huge winter storm where they had no heat for 4.5 days, I believe. And during the period of time that they had no heat, after about 24 hours, due to the temperatures, the apartment complexes and all the other water providers were turning the water off so the pipes wouldn't freeze. So, you know, my son, knowing how important water is, he, you know, filled up his bathtub. He filled up every container he could think of. He knew that he had to have water. He had to have water to flush his toilets. He had to have water to drink. And coming from the Midwest, he knew that a good winter coat and a warm sleeping bag were important too. So I just really think that if we continue to promote this, you know, we will continue to see success, and the water utilities and the customers, you know, it's a win-win for all of us.
I can't agree more. The mutual benefit has been impactful for both the customer and our business side of our drinking water utility. The one thing I would certainly say is being able to offer the LIHWAP program and referring customers to our Impact Community Action Agency is actually a great customer service tool that we're using. So we get the customer service accolades of, you know, referring them on to assistance that's available. And usually we run out of money here locally, or from the state or from our local pots of money. But we haven't run out of money yet. So we keep referring, and it's a great customer service tool on our end to offer to our customers. And the incoming payments that we're receiving and we're applying to customer accounts, like Bill said, previously these unpaid balances would go for, they would go unpaid. We would try to potentially put them in our collection pool to refer on to collection agencies or property liens. But those also have their limitations and challenges and mild success. These are direct payments to us, the water utility, and we get to apply them to the customer account within 35 days when we receive the funds from our action agency.
You guys have all already shared so many great recommendations, but I'm going to hop in and just kind of echo some of the things that you've already shared. Again, you know, we all know how important water is. It's an essential service for all of us. And it's so important that we continue to promote this program and the families in our communities can be safe and healthy. So I would just, again, encourage and recommend, you know, for the states that haven't started, or for those of you that have just started and are working your way through all the bumps and challenges of the program, don't give up. Just continue to be resourceful. Whether you're a state provider or a community action agency or a water service provider, just continue those conversations. Reach out to your peers, not only within your local state, but other locations. We all want the same thing. We all want families to be safe and healthy. And so use your resources and continue on.
I think for our state, what we would like to share and suggest to others is don't give up on signing on new water service providers. We had a significant increase in suppliers from the time that we started accepting applications to today. I believe we were sitting at 299 for a very long time. And we need to get more. And then, and now we're at 376. And most of that was all from the time that we started accepting applications to today. And we still have more that are wanting to sign on and are working on getting in those agreements to us. The more the word gets out, the more customers that know about the program, the more it gets back to the suppliers and they understand that who this can impact. So if you're feeling frustrated and you're worried about, getting the water service providers on board, just keep plugging away. I know we even got some suggestions in our quarterly check-in the other day that we're going to look into, like looking into our associations that in Missouri for our water providers. So, listening to other states has also been helpful as well. But yeah, just keep plugging away because it just takes some time and sometimes just a little bit of talking it out. Taylor has been a great advocate for getting suppliers on. She's the one over that list. She controls the master list, but she's done a great job, and we just keep trying to get more on board, and we keep watching the data for our non-participating supplier rejections, things like that, just so we can get a good overview of how this is all working.
Thank you, everyone. So now I think it's time we can turn to some live Q&A from the audience. And then I can also supplement that with some questions that we've already seen submitted in the chat. So I'll invite our participants to raise their hand using Zoom. If you go down to the bottom of your screen, there should be a reactions button. You can click the raise hand button. If there are any questions that people want to raise live, I'll take those in the order that they come in. And then if there are none from the live folks, then we'll take some questions from the chat. So I'll pause here and see if anyone wants to raise their hand and ask a question live of our panel. Okay, if not, I'll take some questions from the chat. Let's see. So the first question that has been submitted, well, the first question, I just want to make a clarification. Someone asked that their vendor agreement says payments can only apply to certain services. I thought I just heard that if we bill for other services, payment can apply to all services we bill for. Is that correct? I can answer that one actually, which is no. So LIHWAP payments can only go towards water or wastewater payments, the bills. So other services such as trash, like solid waste, electricity, those cannot be paid with LIHWAP. So just to clarify that for the audience. The first question, okay, so the first real question that I'll pose to our panelists, can you speak on the required documentation needed for each of your programs? Have you found that those requirements have been a barrier to your customers?
Well, here in Iowa, we do a joint application with LIHWAP. And so most of our beneficiaries have come through LIHWAP. They're also making use of that program. And so we require the same information for both programs. It's very easy to collect that. The eligibility requirements are the same as well. So in most cases, either people are signing up for both programs at the same time because they have a need existing at the same time, or they may, receive a LIHWAP earlier on and then have a water crisis happen and we've already got that application active. We've got their information. And so really it's just more of a request at that point than it is a separate application. And Paula can probably speak a little more to it from the agency viewpoint, but at a state level, we haven't heard that documentation has been a huge issue. The one thing I guess that has come up has been the documentation for the water bill itself. We have so many different vendors that do things so differently that can look any number of ways. And so we did actually come up with a standard form here in the state that agencies can use to give to water providers that they can complete, that gives us all that information that we need that would be on the bill. And then they sign off on it, the agency signs off on it, verifying the information is correct. And then we can use that in place of the actual bill or disconnection notice if we can't get those actual items. But certainly we prefer the actual bills and notices when we can get them. But Paula, did you have anything to add on that?
No, I agree with what you shared, Bill. Because we're running that as a dual application in conjunction with a LIHWAP program, it just makes sense to do that. And no, we haven't had any, for the most part, we haven't had any issues. You know, it does take some getting used to learning how to read water bills and things like that from, a multitude of vendors. But, overall, it's really been a smooth process.
And for Missouri as well, we actually require the same documentation as we would for LIHEAP, so similar to Iowa, but we just require income verification, social security numbers, bank statements, and copies of the utility bills. So we haven't really ran into much issues. It's, same thing with LIHEAP. For some households that kind of live out in rural areas, elderly and disabled households, they struggle a little bit more with being able to provide that documentation. So we kind of, rely on our agencies to work with those households to make sure that they can get that turned in. But other than that, we really haven't ran into many issues with documentation.
Thanks, everyone. So this next question comes in specifically for Taylor, Stacy, and the team in Missouri. Someone would like to know, does the state of Missouri accept the applications and process the payments, or do you delegate that to your 19 agencies?
The 19 agencies actually process the applications. The state actually makes the payment. So that's kind of our roles. And of course, we provide the technical assistance and everything to our providers.
Thank you. This next question for everyone, if you would just be able to explain what it means by reducing rates for current accounts and how the state or the water utility provider is handling those. I'm not sure if anyone wants to speak on that. That's priority group 3.
I'm pretty sure for fiscal year 22 that we did not have that as one of our priorities, but we're definitely looking at that, so we're watching how much we're expending and seeing, if we may need to adjust that. But yeah, I don't think right now we're doing that as a priority in our state. We're just doing the more the crisis type priorities.
Same here in Iowa. And again, we're looking at it possibly for FY23. But our understanding is that it works similar to, for those that are familiar with LIHEAP, to a regular assistance type of payment. There would be a benefit matrix that would determine how much each household would be eligible for, and then that would serve as a more proactive payment on the account to deal with current bills that are due. So that's, again, something I think we might look at for FY23, depending on where we're at with the money.
Thank you all. Let's see, another question comes in. So as a water provider, we have water, sewer, and Parks and Rec charges on our bill. Does this program cover all of those costs?
No. No. The Parks and Recs part of it, no, it would not cover those. when we run into situations like that, we try a couple different things. Number one, there are other grant programs out there that potentially can help depending on availability. So for example, the Community Services Block Grant, we have some agencies that have a good availability of those funds. And in those cases, you know, they can use that to pay for, in this example, the Parks and Recs costs, and then we can pay for the water costs. Mostly what we see is garbage. That's the number one. And we've dealt with that a number of different ways across the state. We even actually had one city actually had some discretionary funds, city funds, and they volunteered to set up a program to use those funds to address the garbage costs when LIHWAP can come in and pay for the water costs. Payment arrangements are another option. You know, we take the bill down as far as we can. It makes it a lot easier for households to be able to maintain that and pay off the remaining amounts. But no, I mean, just quite honestly, that's the biggest restriction. That's the biggest obstacle in fully expending these funds the way that we would like to and as quickly as we would like to, is that limitation. But I think what we're finding is there's very much a need, if it does become a permanent program, to make a push to try to incorporate some of those other services.
Yeah, and similar to Iowa, same thing with Missouri. We can't pay anything other than the water and wastewater charges on the bill. You know, we've ran into some where suppliers have electric or trash included in the bill. So far, we really haven't. At first, we thought we were going to run into a lot of issues with this. We had a lot of our suppliers reaching out with concerns about that. You know, they wanted to make sure the full bill was going to be able to be paid rather than only a portion. But as of right now, we really haven't received, you know, lots of negative feedback from our suppliers regarding that piece. We're very similar. Our agencies run a lot of programs that can usually step in, you know, in terms of eligibility for income will have to be, you know, checked. But a lot of programs could step in and kind of cover those extra charges. So, you know, as of right now, we haven't really had many suppliers reach out with major issues or concerns about it. So I think we've been pretty successful.
Yeah, I think it helps with the community action agencies since they are local. Sometimes there are local sources that they can tap to pay for like fees or other things that there's not a specific funding source for. So
Right.
yeah, they've been really successful with kind of leveraging the resources they have in their area.
And I would just add that, you know, we don't see a whole lot of issue with it after the fact. Once providers have signed on and once they're participating, it was a major concern prior to them agreeing to participate. And that's why we really kind of reframed it as a payment arrangement, because the common argument was, well, we can't accept partial payments. Well, if you allow for payment arrangements, then you do accept partial payments. It's just thinking about it in a different context. And reframing it that way, it seemed to really make more sense to providers, kind of what that payment was going for, and then what it would look like with the remaining amounts. So we have found that to be helpful.
Thank you. Let's see, I know we have about 10 minutes left, so I'll try to take some last few questions. So this one, I guess, is for anyone, a water service provider or the state. What do you suggest when the water systems won't delay the shutoffs until the customer can get a LIHWAP appointment and pay back the water bills? Let's see, because processing times are so long. Do you have suggestions about that? I can also restate that if anyone needs help. Yeah. Okay.
So this is Dustin. You know, I would say that isn't a huge issue for us. We are pretty flexible with our bills to our customers. They actually don't get a disconnect until the due date of the second bill. So that first bill is 30 days. 30 days past the second due date. On that next bill's due date is when they actually get a disconnect notice. And then, you know, if we think, or we're getting notification from one of the community action agencies or our local community action agency that there's a LIHWAP payment or LIHWAP payment coming in, we will extend that out approximately 30 days. Now we do encourage our customers to continue to pay on their bill, and maybe that's partial payments, but I really think being flexible, as many programs that are out there to kind of work together for these customers, that you can get past that. And we've found some success in trying to work all the programs that we have, and a lot of that comes down to just educating your staff and letting them know, okay, what's out there, what's available, and that continuing that education on a routine basis, and just trying to be flexible with those customers, and letting those customers know that you're being flexible, so hopefully they can, you know, do their part as well. So that would be the response from city utilities, is just try to be as flexible as possible, and it seems to have worked well for us.
From Des Moines Waterworks, we have also previously offered extensions before LIHWAP assistance was available and other assistance funding was available in the past. If a customer calls us and we have referred them to community action agencies or other community services, and they state that they're in the process of getting their application and their meeting, we do place an extension on the account for those, for the information, the documentation, and the meetings to occur. And then also, can't stress enough the communication between the action agency and us as the water utility. Once we start seeing movement from the action agency and the customer that something's happening, and there likely will be a promise to pay and a payment, that's when we really do the full extension. When we get the final promise to pay of a certain amount on a customer account, we do an extension for 30 days, and that's when the 30-day clock for 30-day service termination, uninterrupted service will start. So just the open communication and being like the previous speaker said, flexible with the customer, knowing that they are working on the issue with their community agency. And there's a lot of people working with the community agency, so it does take quite a bit of time to get appointments. And when Impact is seeing a high volume of calls or appointments, Paula lets me know, and that way we are prepared here at Des Moines Waterworks. So we're able to kind of lay the groundwork with the customer and say, yes, we understand Impact is seeing a high call volume. We'll give you an extension, you know, for a week in order for you to get that appointment with Impact.
Thank you for that. And with that, we have about 5 minutes left, so I just want to make sure we have enough time to close out. So I will first thank our panelists, everyone who has participated today, and our participants, and I'll turn it over to Christina Clark, who can give us some parting words. Christina?
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to all of our panelists from Missouri, from Iowa, and also from American Waterworks. Thank you for joining us. I was busy taking some notes over here, and I just want to recap some of what I heard. And so the first thing I want to highlight is that it was shared that this is a mutual benefit that has been impactful for not only the grant recipients, but also for the water service providers. I wrote down that this is a great customer service tool, that it's been helping to recoup unpaid balances, and all of that is happening while you're able to help the people in your communities. And so I'm just reiterating that that's a win-win. I think that one of the things that was definitely highlighted as important is communication. And so the communication to address questions and also to work through challenges and highlight what's working and what's not. Some of the things that I wrote down related to that is that there might be a need for different approaches for rural and for urban water service providers, and some of the capacities and flexibilities related to the way that we're communicating. Also, having dedicated email or dedicating someone to communicate with, and having multiple people so that you can troubleshoot through different issues. I wrote down that templates for communicating, documenting charges was one of the things that was suggested. And then also just persistence in addressing and resolving challenges is something that's important. So I want to recap that. And then I know there's lots of nuggets here, but also just the need to demonstrate, demonstrating the need for this program through successful participation. I wrote that down. I think that we definitely know there's a need for this, and in order to highlight and emphasize how important this is, successful participation was something that was noted as a means for us to do that. And so in regards to our ability to get through all of the questions today, I think that there's still some things in the chat that are left unanswered. And so what we'll do is go through that and come up with some of the things that are applicable across the board and put out some follow-up communication. We'll make sure that that goes out to everyone that was registered today. And then also, in addition, I've seen questions about office hours. And so I want to let you all know that in a follow-up email, we will send out the registration links for office hours. As a reminder, those are capped at 15 participants each. Right now, there's 2 that are pre-scheduled, and based on the need, we may add additional sessions. This will be an opportunity for you to talk in depth with OCS staff. We encourage water service providers to join. If you think that it would be beneficial to join with your state recipients, you can do that. Or you can join just as the water service provider, and we can talk with you through your questions, make sure that communication is flowing well. Another thing I saw in the chat was a lot of questions about when the start dates are for specific areas. And so I just want to highlight once again that data dashboard tool that Mary walked through. On that, you can find information related to each of the individual states that are implementing LIHWAP, and we'll be adding the tribal data to that soon. You can find the start dates for the programs there. You can also find the priorities. So if they're focusing on disconnections and prevention of disconnection only, you'll find that out there. And if they're including a focus on rate reduction as per their initiation of the program, it'll be indicated there as well. And so that's a really good resource for you to go find out about information and how it's being implemented in your particular area. The last thing I want to mention is that on the LIHWAP website, we've got contact information for each of the states. And so if you're interested in reaching out to the state, just to go along with that, the focus that a lot of the states are still working to connect with water service providers. It's a huge amount of work with so many service providers across the country. And so that work is still ongoing. I think that the states would be more than happy to have you all proactively reach out to them. And so if you are interested and you want to find the contact information, that's on the website. You can take a look there and see how you can initiate communications on your end, because the states are still working to enter into those agreements. And so with that, I just want to extend a huge thank you once again to everybody. I think that this has been invaluable, and it will not be our last opportunity to engage. And so I thank you all and hope you enjoy the rest of your day. With that, everyone, we'll conclude the session.
Thank you.
Thank you.